Mania is one of the most misunderstood parts about bipolar. I kind of like it, but it's also terrifying and dangerous. It's really complicated, and it will for sure destroy your life. We're rebuilding this bike and talking about mental health in this series called the Bankruptcy Bike Build. The welfare of the bike industry is no secret. It is hurting as it experiences the post-COVID rebound effect. If you want to deep dive on that topic, the Escape Collective has put out an amazing podcast series specific to that topic, and I've linked that in the description so you can give it a listen if you want. But the reality is, as bad of a situation as the industry finds itself in, if you're in the hunt for bike parts at the moment, you can find some really amazing deals out there. And so as we rebuild this bike, all the parts going back onto it are either coming out of the parts bin or they are coming from a company called Prime, which is from the bike company Wiggle in the UK, which went bankrupt earlier this year famously as they kind of went down in flames in September, October. And I swooped up some really good deals on wheels and handlebars and other bike parts as well. This is the disclaimer where I remind you that I'm not a doctor, I'm just a guy telling my own story, and so anything I talk about in here is just my opinion and should not be used to diagnose anyone, yourself, your crazy uncle at the next family reunion, or whoever. We need to talk about something. I hear people say on a regular basis things like this. I have OCD about how my closet looks. Or I have OCD about how my desk is organized. Except for they don't. Because if they had OCD about how their closet was organized or how their desk was organized, that would mean they have never-ending thought spirals about their closet or about their desk. And those never-ending thought spirals would prevent them from doing their job effectively or being a parent or a family member or a loved one, because those thought spirals would ultimately be destructive to their lives. So what they really mean is, I like my closet organized and I like order, which is very different from having OCD. I also hear people say all the time, my aunt is so bipolar, you should have seen her lose her temper at Thanksgiving. Most people think that when they hear I have bipolar, it means that I can't control my emotions or I lose my temper easily. Do I lose my temper sometimes? Yes, but so does every other person who is alive. Bipolar is a lifelong mental health condition with extreme highs and extreme lows that can be life-threatening. And bipolar requires medical treatment to be managed basically for the rest of a person's life. Your aunt who got hot at you for saying something stupid at Thanksgiving probably was just mad at you and isn't bipolar. And I say all this and use these examples about OCD and bipolar because for those of us with bipolar or OCD, it can be really heavy to hear those words kicked around so cavalier when we have to live with this on a regular basis. Okay, lecture over. When my psychiatrist told me I had bipolar, I had a medium understanding of what that meant. I knew my grandpa had bipolar, I knew his siblings had it, and I knew you could find it within our family tree or the bloodline of our family if you went back a ways. There are two main phases of bipolar. There's the manic, the elevated state, and there's the depression or the low state. Now, most of the population is pretty familiar what depression is because so many people outside of bipolar struggle with it. But that means that the manic or the mania part of it is really misunderstood. Doctors categorize mania in different ways. There's hypomania, which actually feels pretty awesome, if I'm being honest, and it creates high productivity. It's really high functioning, but hypomania can lead to full-on mania. And when a person finds mania, there's usually no need for sleep. Big spending can happen in this phase. Really risky personal behavior. I am fortunate that I have not had psychosis, which is a detachment from reality, but there are certainly people who suffer from that when they are manic. Before I was diagnosed, I never understood what was going on when I was in this state. But I really liked it because of how productive I could be. And thankfully, I didn't spend a lot of money. I tended not to do really dangerous behavior other than I will drive my car very fast when I feel this way. And if I was in a block of training, I felt pretty invincible. I've written books during these times that we still use within our soccer program. A lot of my writing for the documentary filmmaking that I do has occurred in these times because it's a period of creativity and my brain works so fast and I can problem solve really well. And I want to be careful when I talk about how productive that I can be when I'm manic, that people don't start to think that mania is a positive thing, because it's not. It's really destructive. And the further a person lets themselves get into mania or into hypomania even, it can become very dangerous because the ramifications on the backside are so strong. I don't personally struggle with things like gambling or substance abuse or spending money excessively. But for people who do struggle with those things, mania can be a time that causes life-threatening decisions and choices. And so trying to steer away from that state as much as possible is really important. The body is going to self-regulate, and it's not going to self-regulate back to zero. It self-regulates into depression. And for many, the trip from mania to depression, or that transition, is actually more dangerous than the depression itself. For me personally, the times where I have been most suicidal are in that transition, because it kind of feels like you're getting ripped in two mentally. It's definitely where I'm most scared of myself since diagnosis and knowing what's going on. I really thought getting help would be about learning how to not feel depressed or feel that lower energy, but so much of therapy for me was about learning what's going on during mania and learning how to squash the mania and not let it get too far above like a normalized level so that the transition wouldn't be so severe. And kind of learning how to squash those feelings or keep them inside the guardrails, I guess, if you could say that, so that I stayed safe. If you've watched other videos on this channel, or if you listen to the podcast, you will hear me talk about guardrails in my life. And these are things that my therapist and I have put in place, or my therapist has helped me put in place in my own life, so that when I do get elevated, when we move into hypomania or mania, it doesn't get out of control. And it's like 4 very simple things. I go to bed at 11 o'clock no matter what, which is hard when you're feeling really creative and you're not tired at all. But just keeping that routine and forcing myself to go to bed, it keeps me from staying awake all night, which then leads to more nights of staying awake all night. So just going to bed every day is really important. I still write a lot during these times because I am very creative, but I don't act on anything. So if I'm brainstorming a new project, or if I'm starting to write out a new project, that's all I'll do with it. I won't start working on research, or I won't start working on contacting other people until I've had some time to come down and talk to other people and make sure that what I'm working on is a good idea. Another one of my guardrails is that I only spend money on essentials when I'm feeling elevated. I won't order any new equipment for my bikes. I won't order new equipment for the film company, because all those things can be really expensive and they can add up in a hurry. And this way I make sure that the money I'm spending is only on like absolute essentials, like gas for my car. The last guardrail I have in place in my life is I use cruise control almost all the time when I'm driving, because otherwise when I'm elevated, I'll look down and I'm going like 90 or 95 in a 55. But it won't feel like I'm speeding, because everything's like, my brain's moving at a faster pace than the rest of the world. So just using cruise control keeps me safe, keeps everybody else safe too. Ultimately, the guardrails keep the highs from getting too high, and they make sure that when I come down and like find either a more normal, or even if I'm struggling with depression a little bit, that I have functional pieces left to work with, and I haven't effectively set everything on fire in the process. Don't be afraid to ask for help. You are worth the risk to reach out and say, I'm maybe not okay. You don't have to know how to explain it, just ask for help, because you are loved and you are enough. So if you do need help, find a loved one, or a friend, or a coworker, or someone who you can talk to and ask them for help. And if the first person doesn't listen to you, go find somebody else, because you are worth it. If you're stuck and you don't know what to do, you can call 988, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, where a person will guide you in the steps for what is next.